I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that was my next step of training. We all went down on a bus because we were all young and full of piss and vinegar at that time, feeling fearless. And I remember we were on the bus going down south. A couple things I remember was, first off, I'd never been south, so I was shocked at the poverty because there was still a lot of poverty, especially for the African Americans. We went along the Mississippi River. And then as soon as we were getting into Fort Polk, it was dark and we were all kidding around. And when we got into Fort Polk, there was a huge billboard sign of an American soldier bayoneting a Viet Cong in the chest. And it said, "Home of the Combat Infantrymen for Vietnam." And the bus totally got quiet. And we went to the next station. We got out at midnight. And they came in and started hustling us out the bus. And I remember I had a fierce drill sergeant. He was black as coal. He had piercing eyes, and he just came in and read us the riot act, and we got off as fast as we could. So I got to my next training session, but what happened was I must have done something right, because instead of being what we would call 11 Bravo, a straight leg grunt, I was 11 Charlie, which was a mortar man. You had to do some math for fire direction, and so I became a member of that company, which was the mortar company. And they always told us we were smarter than the combat infantrymen, and that's why we were there. So then I did my training, went home for Christmas, graduated, and then at the end of January, had a week's leave, and then February 7th, I flew over to Vietnam. And I got to Vietnam, and I was attached to the 9th Infantry. The 9th Infantry was located south of Saigon. So when I got there, that was one of the first things they told you was, okay, I don't care what you read in the papers back home. You're going to be in Long An province, and you're going to be south of Saigon. You're going to be on the Plain of Reeds, and you're going to be fighting the VC and enemy there. So it was kind of an impressionable time when I got there, because we get into what you call TDI, where you get kind of your assignments. And so I got to the 3rd Brigade. They were in a town called Ben Luck, which was along a river. And one of the first things we had to do was pull perimeter guard. We had a mortar, but we never carried it out in the field. It was in the swampy areas. We had a fire base Chamberlain, Gettysburg, and Tan An was along, it was an old French along the canal. So we conducted was a lot of rice paddies, swamps, what we called nippopalm, and mangrove trees. We conducted search and destroys and ambushes out there. And since we were in an area that was really wet, you only went out for 3 to 4 days because your feet would basically get rotten. You know, your toenails would fall off, the skin would peel, because you never took off your boots. You only had your one change of clothes, and you would try to go ambush and lay down. Sometimes you'd be in water all the way up to your neck on what we call the berm line where the rice paddies were. But at this time, it was free fire since there were no villages around at that time. And so I remember the first time I went to a hot LZ, we went in, and I was sitting next to the machine gun, and I didn't know that. And the new guys, they didn't tell too much about. So as soon as we headed over to the hot LZ, tracers started coming out. And the machine gunner next to me opened up. And I about jumped out of my skin. First off, it was so loud. But the thing was, his hot shells were going down the back of my neck as they were ejecting, and I couldn't get out of the way. And so as we went into the hot LZ, they kind of strafed, rocketed it. We got down, and we got in there, and I was just literally shaking in my boots. There were some times when you had some pretty hairy firefights, but we never really hit any big company-sized things. And the only time that really changed is when we went into Cambodia. As soon as you crossed from Vietnam to Cambodia, you could tell from the air, because Vietnam looked like the moon. The whole border had been shelled and bombed. They had all these craters. And we went into Cambodia, and you'd see villages, and you hardly saw any. And so we went in, and we hit the LZ early. And this part I remember all the time, because it was just like out of the movie Platoon. We crash land into this village. It's burning. Artillery's coming in. The gunships are strafing. People are shooting all over the place. Little figures are running around. They're shooting back at you. Jets are screaming overhead. So we all come in, and we hit the deck. And we landed our 4 Eagle flight in one area. And next to us, B Company came in. Well, they hit a minefield. So the first guy jumped off the helicopter, blew right back in. Next guy jumped off, blew right back in. So they literally had to lift off and get out of there. And so we came in, and we were going to go secure the village and blow up the bunkers. and our colonel gets out, and there's like this moment of quiet, and we called him the Gray Ghost, and he came out, and literally he had 45 strapped across his waist with pearl handles, and it was just like out of the movie. He started going like, God damn it, this is war. This is what it's about. You guys are gonna really enjoy this. And we were just like, oh my God, because he was kind of a gung-ho guy. And so we went, swept the villages, we got in firefights, contacts, there was booby traps. You know, combat's really kind of funny. It's not like John Wayne. You don't see somebody and shoot back and forth. And all of a sudden the medic goes racing up. And he said, booby trap. And we're all kind of standing around. I got my 30-pound radio on with all my gear, and I'm kind of hunched over, and we're looking, and he jumps into this canal, and he pulls up Joe Donnelly, who was actually from Milwaukee, and he said, help me, guys, help me. And so basically I look around, and the guy behind me was hit, 2 guys in front of me were hit, and I was like totally unscathed. So I dropped off my radio, and a couple guys, we went in, and we pulled him out of it, and he's kind of moaning and talking, and he had a radio on. We unstrap him, and we're all like, where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? And the medic's going over him, and all of a sudden somebody said, well, there's blood coming out of his pant leg there. And so the medic says, okay, let's see what he's got. And so he cut the pant leg open, and all this blood gushed out, and his artery was just flopping because he had all the meat on the inside of his leg blown off. And so then it was like, they never really teach you the training. You'd go through all this stuff. But we just had to hug the ground there because all this stuff was just going around, the dirt's flying and all that kind of stuff. And the next day you go out and you help them kind of clean up bodies, clean up the battlefield and the battlefield, and that pretty much was about it. I was very lucky. I don't know why I was never hit. I always tell my wife God must have came me back to marry her or something like that. I don't know. But I never was wounded, but there was plenty of times where I was with guys that were wounded. I was 20 years old, so I'd spent I had 401 days in Vietnam, so I was a little over 13 months. I came home, I flew in, I had like about $1,200. I had nowhere to spend money. So then I got on a plane and I went to the United Airlines, and they take all your identification away. And you know, when people talk about being treated badly, this was probably my episode. I got up into San Francisco. I went to United Airlines, I said I gotta go to Milwaukee. And so they're like looking at me, and I'm, you know, a little guy, tan, got my little uniform on, and got my little kit bag along. And so I paid for the ticket, and all I had was 50s and 100s. And so the woman's gone like, well, wait a minute. And they get the manager over. And next thing you know, he's like, well, where'd you get this money? I'm like, well, I just got out of the service, I got paid. He's like, where's your orders? I'm like, I don't have any orders, I'm going home, I've been discharged. He says, well, where's your ID card? I said, I don't have one. He says, well, wait a minute here. Stand over here, young man, because there's all these people standing there. And I'm really starting to feel humiliated, getting mad. You know, and he's finally hems haws, and he calls somebody, and he says, you know, you got a lot of big bills, and you shouldn't have that, but I'll let you go this time. And so I got on the plane, and I was just like, you know, Jesus Christ, some other choice words. And so then when I got on the plane, I'm driving, we're flying home, and the stewardess asked me, do you want a drink? And I said, yeah, I'd love to have a beer. She says, you have an ID? And I said, no. And she says, well, you guys from Vietnam, you're all the same. You all think you come home, you're supposed to get a beer or something like that. I can't give you one. And I remember tears were welling up into my eyes, and I just kind of like cried. And the thing I remember is my poor mother, not my poor mother, but she hugged me and she said, thank God you're home, you haven't changed. And I thought, you have no idea what I've been through, putting people in body bags. They used to make us dig graves. We'd go out and find a bunker complex, dig up the graves, find out how they died, look for weapon caches. You know, there's some things that you never tell that go to the grave, but you know, you're going through dead bodies, putting your friends on. We went there and we killed people. That was our job. That's how you stayed alive. They shoot you, you shoot them. That's what we're there for, is to kill people. I went to UWM, and I didn't last very long. There was an English class where they have a professor from New York, and he did a story about the baby killers from Vietnam, and I got in a big argument in the class with him. And then he threw me out of the class, and at that point I said, okay, I'm not. So I went back to who I was, a blue-collar worker. I went to A.O. Smith. I went and worked at A.O. Smith, running punch presses, being a welder. And I did that, and I didn't get married till I was 45. And one of the things I always think is because of Vietnam. because there was a time, and it's not that I'm proud of, but I do admit it, we were at Kuchi, which was the main base of the 25th, and we pulled berm duty. And what happens there is kids would sneak in the wire and steal the Claymore mines, and they would sell them to the VC. And they were doing it to earn money. At that time, we kind of knew it, but we didn't really know it. And so on guard duty, you would fire warning shots over their head. That was the whole thing. You'd try tear gas, you'd try this, and fire warning shots. And I remember one time, these kids just wouldn't quit. And so one time I raised my weapon and I fired a shot. And I know I was damn close because the kids stopped. All of them stopped. And they all left that fence. And at that moment I thought, like, what kind of person have I become to shoot kids? And so I carry that. And that was in December. And I always feel that's one of the reasons I don't have children, and I never got married, and I don't have kids. Because I felt there was a well of anger that could be tapped at any time. And I just didn't want to get into that. People always say, you're great with kids. You do well. You'd be a great teacher. But I always carry that in the back of my mind. Yeah, maybe I would have been, but I didn't want to take that chance after I came back home. And so I worked blue collar for a long time, and then I got in the bar business. By this time I was hanging around, drinking a lot, playing softball, doing everything you can, because I was trying to live like 90 years old. Recently we had a softball game with some guys I graduated with, and I was talking to a guy named Mike. He said, man, I remember when you came home. He said, you know, you'd call me up even if I didn't have money. You'd say, let's go out. And it was like every night, going to little joints around Milwaukee. I was working, living at home, had a lot of money, didn't save anything. I was living like the world never ended.